there, and welcome back to the Caffeinated Classroom. If this is your first time here, my name is Marie. I'm a high school English teacher in San Diego, California, and I'm actually back in my classroom. This is the end of a very long day of hybrid concurrent teaching, and if you're not down with the lingo, that means that I've had anywhere between like 2 to 8 students in my classroom. That's just kind of my show up rate during a class period, physically in the room behind like plastic partitions, while the rest of my students, 30-ish, are on Zoom, and we're all doing things at the same time. Today was a lot of like experimenting with breakout rooms because they're in pre-selected groups for book clubs. It was both a nightmare, and also we made some good discoveries, right? Like it was like one of those things. But that is not what today's episode is about. Today, we are talking about a question that I get like around this time of year and around like the beginning of fall, like late summer. And that is, how do I prepare for student teaching? How to prepare for an experience unlike any other experience we've ever had. And those of you who are veteran or even new teachers, but you've already done your teacher training through a credential program, you've already done your student teaching, you can attest that like there's a lot that we can explain about student teaching. There's a lot to expect from student teaching. Until you do it, you don't quite get it. But I do have 5 tips for you for prepping. I have 5 tips for things that you can do now, even if you don't know where you're gonna be, what you're gonna be teaching, who you're gonna be. Like if you don't, there are so many variables that come down to like when your institution of record places you in a student teaching position, there's a lot that's outside of your realm of control, but I do have 5 tips for you for prepping in the first place. And I have my notes next to me so that I don't get totally off track, which those of you who've been here for a while know I want to do. So the first thing that I have to say for preparing for student teaching, or just for like anything, any new venture, but especially student teaching, is have a place to store your ideas. Maybe that's a few places, maybe that's a digital place and a physical place, but like a specific designated place to keep all of the ideas that you will get and that will be given to you. You'll read an article, you'll get a great idea. You'll talk to somebody, you'll see somebody teach, you'll have a great idea. You'll wanna write it down, you'll wanna save it. You'll wanna save that film clip that you saw for something because it could be great in your future classroom. I guarantee you're not gonna remember these things. I guarantee that if you put it in a random place, you are going to forget about it. And it was probably the most amazing thing that's gonna change the face of teaching as we know it, right? Have a place to put all of those so that they're all in one bucket, whatever that bucket looks like. Like I said, if it's a physical notebook, if it's Pinterest, if it's a Google Drive folder, if it's some sort of a combination therein, if it's like a Google Keep note or whatever they're called, and you like put all the links in one place, just know that you'll know where you're going to find it all, and because you've been putting it all in the exact same place. That is like, had I done that, I think a lot of the like, oh, what was that one idea I had? Like a lot of that would have been alleviated in my first couple of years teaching, because I could have just looked back through all the ideas that I had pouring towards me, because there's a lot of inspiration to be had in the world and in like any given classroom or like school setting. And so having a place to store those is key. The second tip I have for you is, if you do know what grade level, like if you know you're going to be high school, if you know you're going to be upper elementary, familiarize yourself with the standards and read the texts. If you are an ELA teacher or going to be studying to become an ELA teacher, and you know that you're going to be doing secondary, which is middle through high school, this is going to be a little bit more difficult, right? But there are some key texts that you can get your hands on. If you know, I mean, there are a lot of great things that you can do if you know the school you're going to be at right there. Think of who you can talk to and get in contact with to prepare yourself as best you can. If you don't, here comes my third tip. If you don't know the exact grade, or you don't really know, like if you are like, I don't know, it's going to be elementary, could be transitional kindergarten through 5th or maybe even 6th, depending on where you're at. Still familiarize yourself with the standards. I'm going to say this is 2 tips encompass familiarize yourself with the standards. because looking at standards, so like for instance, I'm in California. We have California Common Core state standards. They are skills-based. They are for secondary anyways. I have 9th and 10th grade standards and then 11th and 12th grade standards. They come in the areas of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And there's some, variation there within, but becoming as familiar as you can with whatever the content or Common Core or whatever the standards are I think we're all Common Core now, aren't we? I don't know, I could be fooling myself. Whatever those standards are, familiarize yourself so that you can start to speak the edubabble lingo. That is the thing that is going to trip you up quite a bit. Familiarizing yourself with the standards doesn't just help from a teaching perspective, from like a lesson planning instructional view. It also helps with all of the stinking paperwork for the evaluations and the observations and the induction programs. Once you actually get your teaching job, there's a lot of edubabble, which goes into a lot of paperwork and reports and self-evaluations and all of these things that are exhausting. And when you become more familiar with the lingo, it's a little bit easier, and that little bit will save you hours of energy and time on a Sunday where all you want to do is watch reruns of So You Think You Can Dance and drink a smoothie, right? Like, just, asking for a friend, right? Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3. First, designate a place to store ideas. Then, if you know what grade level, familiarize yourself with the standards. Read the texts if you can read the texts and find out what is generally read at that grade level. If you don't, familiarize yourself with the standards. Start to get a little bit more fluent in the way that education and the education world speaks and writes and expects you to keep up and understand when you've never had experience with any of this. And the people who are expecting you to understand what a content standard means or like a Common Core standard means when you don't have any familiarity with it, these are the people with PhDs who have been doing this stuff for years. And they forget what it is to not understand the way these things are written. It's like legal speech. You have to have it's a skill to build. Start building that skill now. My 4th tip for you is to start figuring out some routines for yourself, for your life, for your everyday. Figure out your meal routines if you can, like figure out what you're gonna do for breakfast, how you want your lunches to go, what sort of dinner is gonna be. I mean, you're gonna be tired and you're gonna be working longer hours than you ever did for the most part in college or like before, depending on where you're at in life. This could be a big jump into the deep end of like never been busier in your life. Some of you are like, I've done these sorts of things before, I'll be fine, but that's my experience. I was more busy than I have ever been in my entire life in student teaching. And I needed to, had I had some routines in place, it would have been a whole heck of a lot better. Figure out a good morning routine for yourself, what you know it takes for you to be really organized and like ready to go in the morning. And then also an evening routine where you can unwind and do things that are healthy for yourself so that you know that your brain is operating at its like ultimate optimal capacity and you are physically energized as much as you can be, because like I said, it's a lot. And then my last tip is get ready to start asking for critique. You are going to get your teaching critiqued. You are going to be observed by a lot of different people at various levels of education and in districts and on college campuses and high school and middle school and elementary and wherever you are campuses. Educators will be watching you. They will be giving you feedback. Learn how to take that feedback. I had a really hard time with feedback that wasn't, oh my gosh, that was perfect, because you can't be perfect at anything the first time you try. And if you are, then first of all, you're magic. And secondly, there is no perfect teacher out there. And you will not be the perfect teacher with your first lesson or your 28th lesson or your bajillionth lesson like I'm in. I'm still not perfect and I'm never going to be. And that's part of the art of teaching. It's always developing. It's a craft and you're honing and sharpening that craft. But I will say something amazing that really started to click with me. I want to say it was like year 5 of teaching, is I started to crave critical feedback. What can I do better? What can I keep doing that was working? And how can I amplify that? And then also, please show me where my shortcomings are. And it's not a personal fault. It is not anything that is wrong with me. it's just something I can work on and something I can focus on, because a lot of teaching, especially early on when you're not sure what to look for out of students or out of yourself, feels like a lot of walking in a cloud and just grasping at whatever you can grasp at. If you figure out how to ask for critique and how to take critique and how to work with it, it's going to make you a better teacher. It's going to just make things better and easier and more productive from a very early standpoint in your career. So that is my 5 tips. I am an English language arts teacher. Those are my 5 tips for getting ready for student teaching, whenever it is you're going to be student teaching or any sort of a training. I will be back in a couple of weeks with another episode of Teacher Q&A, just like that. So if you have any questions, burning questions that you would like answered on an episode of the Caffeinated Classroom Teacher Q&A, if you were a teacher, just let me know. Thank you guys so much. I will see you next time. Bye.